Hello, and welcome to a very special, very relevant, very topical Rant Rave review. Gather around the fire, grab your favorite cup of cocoa, and listen to me talk about censorship and Fahrenheit 451. It shouldn't be relevant, but it is. So, this book was written in 1951, and yet, I was actually going to review it months ago, and I kept getting messed up. I'm glad I waited because we live in a culture that likes to cancel things. Perhaps it likes to cancel culture. There's a word for that. Anyway, yesterday was Dr. Seuss's birthday, and whatever company produces his books decided that they will no longer be publishing 6 books for, quote, racist and or, culturally insensitive or something. I don't know. Not actually quote. Images. So they're gone. They're not being published anymore. And again, we can argue about whether or not those images actually are racist or aren't. Or maybe they're just stereotypical. Maybe you could fix them. You could easily fix them. Etc., etc. But where I'm thinking about this is as a librarian, because the 2 pillars of librarianship, essentially, one is free speech, obviously. The other is free access. So freedom of access means people have a right to read. People have a right to be exposed to ideas. Even if, the culture at large is like, that idea is bad and dangerous. Too bad. People have a right to go look at it and explore it and see, what is this idea saying? Is it dangerous? Is it good or bad? Basically, librarians are anti-thought police. Is what we are. We're like, no. People can read stuff that's bad. People can read stuff that's bad. It doesn't matter if it actually objectively is morally repugnant or bad. You can make it available. So we're not going to ban Dr. Seuss's books. However, because they are literally out of print now, those 6 books, there's speculation that people will start selling them online for obscene amounts of money and maybe start stealing them from libraries. So many libraries have opted to keep those books behind the counter so people can basically get them as reference books and read them in the library but not take them home or take them out. And they won't be sitting on the shelf even in the reference section because people might sticky fingers it and walk out of the library. In theory, this is good because it keeps it for people to read who can't spend buku bucks buying books on the internet. On the other hand, there have been historically cases where libraries have kept dangerous materials behind the counter in order deliberately to censor them. It happened during the Cold War with a bunch of communist stuff. So that got me thinking, I'm like, is this censorship? Was this the intent? Maybe it's not, they didn't want to censor all books, but now it basically ipso facto is being censored. I don't know, is it? Plus other topics. There have been, the world of librarianship is rife with controversy, but y'all will have to read about that on my blog next weekend. Yes, I'm not going to talk about that anymore. I'm just going to focus on Fahrenheit 451, but it's relevant, and it's interesting. And more people are trying to ban books and get them taken out of stores, get them, taken out of libraries, getting their authors to be canceled. Even if, and what's funny is sometimes, the book is controversial, so we should cancel the author, and sometimes the book is completely non-important. There's nothing in it that's objectionable, but we still have to cancel the, the creator because they're bad. And it's really? Nah, I'm not about that. It's probably why I became a librarian. Yeah, I don't know. But anyway, enough about that. On to the book, Fahrenheit 451. It was written in 1951. It could have been written today. It is horrifyingly prophetic. I'm going to do mostly non-spoilers. But the reason I like this book is because I would describe it as a bottom-up dystopia. So a lot of dystopias, like Hunger Games and literally every YA dystopia is the government, the big mean government's doing stuff to you and you have to resisty, #resisty. Yeah. And even 1984, it's like, the government doing this, they control all aspects of your lives. And again, most dystopias were like that. But what I like about this one is it is basically people's complacency allowed it to happen. Yeah, now during the book, the government controls things and bans books and burns them. But people let it happen. It wasn't top down. So, what do I mean? Well, first let me just go into the description of the book. Because I was never required to read this in school. I know some people have read it, some people haven't. A lot of people like to talk about it. Much like 1984, people like to talk about it who have clearly never read it. They'll be like, this is just like 1984, and then proceed to basically act like the government in Big Brother. Yeah, same thing. They're like, oh, it's about censorship. And I'm like, it's about so much more than that, my friends. So much more. That is only one piece of the pie. So, long story short, it's kind of like the future. A vague general future. There are, technological things that are different. Houses are fireproof now. There's safety, which means that firemen don't have to fight fires. Firemen in this future set fires. They set fires to contraband material, like books. You're allowed to have comic books, but not regular books. That's the one thing where I'm like, okay, Ray Bradbury, old man, not liking comics, those darn kids, but whatever, okay? He's allowed to be wrong sometimes. But yeah, so the main character is Guy Montague. He is a fireman. He likes his job. That's the other thing I like about this book as a dystopia novel is I feel like a lot of YA, everyone kind of knows they're in a dystopia, whereas in real dystopias, many people are fine with the way things are. They literally don't know it can be another way. They don't know how awful life is. And Guy is an example of that, where he is a thoughtful, good person, but he has never seen anything else, basically. So he likes his job, he likes burning books, he's kind of fascinated by them. I forget, at some point in the story, we realize that he has a little group of books that he's kind of smuggled away, and I don't remember if he's done that, if it starts during the story or right before, but either way. So that's him. His wife, Montague's wife, Mildred, is sort of the representation of everything that is wrong with society. So she sits all day in her room with her family, which is essentially a sitcom. It's 3 wall-sized TV screens. So her living room is literally TV screen, TV screen, TV screen. And they're her family that she interacts with and laughs with. And she wants to buy a 4th wall to make the illusion complete. And again, this is written in 1951, so think about early TV. Sitcoms, just very, very, fluff. Not much is happening. When she's not watching her family, she has her seashells in her ears, which are basically earbuds. Yeah, so she's always plugged into something, always watching something or plugged in. And there's one part where Guy comes in to the bedroom and it turns out that she has OD'd on sleeping pills. She's not dead, but she's OD'd on sleeping pills. And he has to call the hospital, like, holy moly, And it's left intentionally vague of, did she accidentally take too many because she's so, out of it and not thinking and disconnected and accidentally OD'd? Or is she so unhappy with her disconnectedness that she did it on purpose and is trying to kill herself? Either way, she claims it was an accident, but we don't really know. Either way, it's incredibly tragic. But when the paramedics come and pump her stomach, they're like, hey, don't worry, man. We do this all the time. It's not a big deal. Which means, that's how common this occurrence is. People are, ODing on drugs constantly. It's not even something to be worried about. This is the dystopia we find ourselves in. It's not just censorship. It is much more than censorship. It's a disconnect. It's a, not thinking about things, not connecting with things. It even mentions hit and runs are a common occurrence because people just carouse around like crazy. Oh, you killed somebody? Human life is meaningless. They mentioned in one... Sorry, my kitty cat is... Stop it, you... They mentioned briefly that... Yeah. They mentioned briefly that... Oh, people don't even have funerals anymore. You just send your bodies away to the incinerator. Bye. We don't have to care about them. Yeah. So it's this emptiness. Contrasted with, one day in the beginning of the novel, Montague is walking home and he meets his neighbor kid, Clarice. And Clarice is like I'm sorry, my kitty is being extremely naughty on purpose. Stop being naughty on purpose. He's trying to get into trouble. Boop. 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 All right. So anyway, Clarice is the opposite of Mildred. Clarice thinks about things. She is present. She's what we would call like mindful. And even the scene that she's described in it talks about like the leaves skittering across the sidewalk and the moonlight on her, and it's almost like ethereal, but like, I don't know. I love the way Bradbury describes things. Anyway, it's really cool. You can tell that she thinks about things. She talks about things with her family. I would almost describe her as a stereotypical homeschooled kid. Like, that's just how she comes across to me, where, her and her family think about things intellectually. They have an interior life. And it's kind of, I don't believe they ever say it, but it's kind of implied that they probably read books. My goodness. My cat. What is wrong with you, child? Oh, my goodness. He wants to be in the video. This is Timothy. He's almost never in the video, but he's a very handsome man. And he's very naughty. So anyway, that's like the basics of the book. But again, like, it's not just censorship. There's also a scene where the wife's friends are over and they're having their little very plastic, fantastic 1950s-y, get together. And some of her friends are talking about how they don't, they have kids, but they don't understand them and they just send them off to like wherever. And then one of them is like, oh yeah, I've had like 3 abortions, like whatever. And it's just like, like, this is the society. Everyone's disconnected. Everyone is atomized. There's even a huge disconnect between Montague and his wife. Everyone's an individual and nobody is, is part of a family, even if you are part of a family. That is the dystopia we're dealing with. It's really interesting. It makes sense given the 1950s and like what was happening and the societal changes. But yeah, it's also eerily weird considering like AirBuds and people moving away and all kinds of stuff today. But you came here for censorship, didn't you? Well, okay, I guess I can read to you some stuff about censorship. This is my self-immolation, as I'm sure that some people, with me reading Ray Bradbury, will decide that I should be canceled. So, here we go. These are his words, not mine. Like I said, I don't agree with everything he says, but it's a little prescient. So, this is where... Oh, Beatty! I forgot about Beatty, my favorite boy. Captain Beatty is the fire chief. And I love him. He's one of those characters who, like, he's a bad person, but he's awesome. One sec. So he, more than any other character in the book, sees society for what it is. Like, he knows how messed up it is and how sad, and he kind of just, like, doesn't care. He's kind of given up. It's heavily implied, and then I believe in a short story or a play that he wrote, confirmed that he used to love books. I believe he even quotes literature. Like, you can actually, like, be like, oh, that's a quote to that literature, that's a literary reference. He used to love books, and he no longer does. And he understands what led society to how it is, and he's just kind of given up. He's like, we burn things. Whatever. So at this point in the book, he's kind of explaining to Montague how things came to be. So I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's really long. But he talks about how, sports became more and more organized and then bigger and bigger. Towns became just motels and people were just moving and not really having connections. Again, atomized. And again, in the 1950s, you had the whole company man where you would literally move a man and therefore his family to another town across the country. So his connection would be to the company, not to the town. And that kind of thing happened. And it's creepy and awful. So, this is Beatty. This is not me. Please don't cancel me. Now, let's take up the minorities in our civilization, shall we? Bigger the population, the more minorities. Don't step on the toes of the dog lovers, the cat lovers, Mormons, Baptists, second-generation Chinese, Swedes, Italians, Germans, etc., etc. The bigger your market, Montague, the less you handle controversy. Remember that. All the minor minorities with their navels to be kept clean. Authors, full of evil thoughts, lock up your typewriters. They did. So yeah, you can't offend anybody. And then he says, you can keep their comic books. Again, he doesn't like comic books, but whatever. You can keep your comic books and your three-dimensional sex magazines, of course. It didn't come from the government down. There was no dictum, no declaration, no censorship to start with. No. Technology, mass exploitation, and the minority pressure carried the trick. Yeah. And then they talk about, well, okay, but then why did the firemen be introduced? And he basically talks about how, remember like in school how there was always that one good kid in class who was better than everybody else? They're brighter than everybody else. And he says, blah, 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 blah. We must all be alike. Not everyone born free and equal, as the Constitution says, but everyone made equal. Each man the image of every other. Then all are happy. For there are no mountains to make them cower, to judge themselves against. A book is a loaded gun in the house next door. Burn it. Breach man's mind. Let's see. And then he basically explains, like, how, the houses are fireproof and now firemen burn books. This is the firemen. They were given a new job as custodians of our peace of mind, the focus of our understandable and rightful dread of being inferior. Official censors, judges, and executioners. That's you, Montague, and that's me. I freaking love Beatty. I love him so much. Yeah. And the whole time during the scene, like, Mildred's kind of in the background, and it's like, and she's just watching TV the whole time, and it's just, like, really creepy. And I don't know, it's so good, so good. Let's see. You must understand that our civilization is so vast that we can't have our minorities upset and stirred. Ask yourself, what do we want in this country above all? People want to be happy, isn't that right? Haven't you heard it all your life? I want to be happy, people say. Well, aren't they? Don't we keep them moving? Don't we give them fun? That's all we live for, isn't it? For pleasure, for titillation. And you must admit our culture provides plenty of these. And then he goes on to say, and again, don't cancel me, this is his language, not mine, it was from 1951. Colored people don't like Little Black Sambo? Burn it. White people don't feel good about Uncle Tom's Cabin? Burn it. And then he talks about the funerals, how you don't want to think about people being dead, so you just burn them off site. And he says, let's not quibble over individuals with memoriams. Forget them. Burn all, burn everything. Fire is bright, and fire is clean. So that is Fahrenheit 451 and its take on censorship. Prescient. Prophetic. Yeah, you can't offend anybody because we all have to be happy, and happiness does not mean thinking about things or finding the truth or, living for something. Happiness is just feeling happy and not feeling bad and not thinking and just having fun. And I'm just like, Ray Bradbury, what year did you write this? Like, it's crazy. So that's the non-spoilery part of the book. I highly recommend that book. Again, people always talk about it, and I don't think they've actually read it. Yeah, I don't think they've actually read it. But you should read it. It's very interesting. Let's get into spoilers. So if you don't want to be spoiled, go to have happy lives somewhere and then read my blog this weekend. It'll be interesting. I think you'll be very interested in it. Because my thing is, I'm like, I fully admit that some books are repugnant. Like, morally repugnant. But how you handle them there's a right way and a wrong way, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, let's get to spoilers. So, I'm not going to spoil too much, but I will say that I'm not going to spoil very much. Yeah, but there's one amazing part at the end of the book by itself that I didn't like the last third of the book. There's actually 3 parts. There's the hearth and the salamander, the sand and the sieve, and burning bright. That last third, not a fan. Not because I don't know. It was just kind of meh. It felt a little preachy to me. And what I didn't mention in the rest of the review is the entire book happens during basically a Cold War scenario because, you know, it's the 1951. The Cold War is kind of in the back of everyone's brain constantly. And so we know that this is like a threat. But again, it's like not much of a threat. You're like, oh, whatever, you know, war. At the end of the book, the city gets nuked. Yeah, that happens in that book. I know, right? And it's talking about Mildred, Montauk's wife. After all this insane stuff has happened in the rest of the book, she's just right back watching TV with her family, doesn't even care. And the bomb hits, and a split second before everything gets wiped away, the power goes out. And it's just a black screen, and she can see her reflection, and she screams. So great. Like, what an image. What a thematic, like, yeah. Like, she can't stand being with herself, and she can't stand seeing herself. It is so interesting and so cool. And yeah, and that's why I don't like that people just reduce it to censorship in terms of, like, you shouldn't ban books. It's also, like, you need to have an interior life and think about things. You need to have your own ideas and, like, reflect on yourself and reflect on society. Because, yeah, I think that, how can I put this? I feel like the same thing is happening with our society in terms of, like, yes, right now we're living in cancel culture, but for a long time before that, we've just been kind of, like, turning off our brains and just kind of not thinking, chasing, like, experience and pleasure over, you know, purpose. Pleasure over purpose, I guess I would say. So, yeah, I think it's interesting. And I feel like not Fahrenheit 451. Let me get real for a sec. Cancel culture, I feel like, is a reaction against that by accident in the wrong direction. Where, yes, there are some people in cancel culture who genuinely just, a certain YouTubers say, wake up in the morning and ask who they want to hurt. Like, they just want to hurt somebody. But there's other people I've met in real life who are, like, super into cancel culture, who are, like, genuinely trying to be good people. They genuinely believe that, like, if you hear certain ideas, or if certain people hear certain ideas, like, it will hurt them, or it's dangerous, or something. And, like, their heart's in the right place, but they clearly have not thought about these things. Like, they want a purpose, but they're not introspective enough to be like, wait, is what I'm doing a good thing? Are the people I'm going after, like, do they deserve to be gone after? Yeah. So those are my closing thoughts. Again, read my thoughts about censorship and Dr. Seuss and many, many things. It's an interesting issue. And again, I don't think it's black and white. I do know that, like, the official, like, ALA thing is like, you should put porn magazines in the hands of children. Not quite. Like, they're not that bad. But, like, I would say their pendulum swing is a little crazy, a little insane. But cancel culture is also insane. And I'm like, no, you need, like, a middle ground. A middle ground of, like, people can access things, but, like, let's not be insane. And, yes, intention does matter, but you'll have to read the blog. See you next time. Have a cozy, wonderful time. Read some good books, maybe even some Dr. Seuss. I recommend Fox and Socks. Goodbye. Good night. Peace out.